here today to discuss Every 12 Seconds, Industrialized Slaughter and the Politics of Sight by Timothy Pachirat? Pachirat? I'm not totally sure how to pronounce it. This is the cover, as you can tell. I have been meaning to read this for a long time. This was published several years ago by Yale University Press, and it is about a political science professor who spends 5 months working in a slaughterhouse in Omaha, Nebraska, and not only detailing his experiences, but also reflecting on them and reflecting upon the politics of sight and why we need to hide things that we find distasteful in the modern world. This is extraordinary. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I was really pleased with his observations and with the way that he made me think. Now, the author, so in his prologue and in his epilogue, he sort of analyzes his experiences and analyzes our modern society and our distaste for distasteful things, so to speak. And then in the chapters in the middle, the broad section is about his experiences. He worked hanging livers, he worked driving the cattle into the slaughterhouse, and he also worked as a quality assurance manager. And so he describes his experiences, and he describes his interactions with the other slaughterhouse workers and the gross labor inequalities there, and how unfairly, and sort of the environment that's cultivated and how the employees are treated, and all of the racial divisions and class divisions that are present there. And he is a very, what's the word? But we can see through his eyes everything that he sees, and he is a very great narrator, so to speak, as he leads us along on this journey. And so in the prologue, he says, one advances the idea that power operates through the creation of distance and concealment, and that our understandings of progress and civilization are inseparable from, and perhaps even synonymous with, the concealment, but not an elimination, of what is increasingly rendered physically and morally repugnant. Its alternative counters that power operates by collapsing distance, by making visible what is concealed. And that's what the whole of this book really is. It's this idea of, is progress all about eliminating the distasteful from the public eye, or is it about exposing it? And there's this old saying, and I can't remember who it's attributed to. Well, lots of people have probably spoken of it. If slaughterhouses had glass walls, everyone would be a vegetarian. And even amongst the slaughterhouse itself, the author describes how the slaughterhouse workers will feel guilty, and so even amongst the slaughterhouse, so he provides several maps. Slaughterhouse workers, they'll say, "Oh, I don't work on the kill floor." Those are the guys who are really responsible. And then the other workers on the kill floor will say, "Well, I'm not the knocker." And the knocker is the man who shoots the cattle in the head. Ideally one time to knock them out unconscious, but realistically it often takes several more shots. And they think that, so even though they're the ones who are driving the cattle to slaughter, or the ones who are cutting them up, they say, "Oh no, I'm not the knocker, I'm not the one guilty." And we're all sort of collectively passing guilt off onto each other, and onto more and more unprivileged, unfortunate members of society, and sort of hoisting our collective societal blame off onto them. And so let me see. So he includes lots of pictures of building layouts of the slaughterhouse that we can kind of, and we're taken on a tour through his eyes, through the building, and through where the cattle lead and what happens at every single station, in an attempt to, again, expose what's currently happening. And this is something that the slaughterhouses are very against, and the agricultural lobbyists are very against, because they know that the injustices that happen will terrify people. And so that's why I don't know if any of you are familiar, but a lot of animal rights organizations like Mercy for Animals, they do send undercover investigators into slaughterhouses and into cattle farms and ranches and various other similar locations, and they film what's happening there, and they get footage of the most terrible, atrocious things. And actually, a lot of states are now making it illegal and are making it a felony to do that, and making it a felony, which is just ridiculous, and it's because they have something to hide. And I will link some videos down in the description box. Mercy for Animals is a terrific organization. I highly recommend you go check that out. If you are a meat eater, or if you're someone who is an omnivore in any sense, I think it is our responsibility to view the footage and to know where our meat comes from, and to expose these hidden corners of society. And so, and again, it's not about, but seeing the barbaric practices that are enacted is really completely eye-opening, and it's absolutely horrifying. Like, it's common practice, for example, this was a cattle slaughterhouse, but it's common practice for little male chicklets to be crushed up in grinders because they're useless, and things like that that are absolutely atrocious and inhumane. And he describes this practice as well. How about when he's a quality assurance manager, part of his job is to comply with the USDA and make sure that certain practices are humane. But he talks about how if he doesn't write down the correct numbers, so to speak, he'll get fired and other people will get fired. So he is forced to lie, along with all the other QCs, quality control people, about about how these poor cows are being, about how many times it takes for them to be shot in the head before they're killed. And he describes too, these cattle, they come from, from everywhere and in all different stages, and some are pregnant and some are diseased. And at one instance near the end of the book, a heifer actually gives birth in the line right before she's about to be slaughtered. And he hears this on the radio, and one of the managers says, "Oh, we have the USDA inspectors here," and another one says, and suggests that, well, the cow can't be slaughtered until the placenta and the afterbirth is taken out. And he suggests just reach up and grab it and yank it out so we can kill the cow. And the guy comes back, tells him back and says, "No, the government's here. We can't do that." And and he provides a stark realization about the difference between how our perception of how slaughterhouses work, either by the USDA or by any sense that it's humane and that it is medical, or in terms of like hygiene, that it is safe for human consumption. And he describes sort of the absolute huge number of violations that just keep surmounting and surmounting and surmounting, both in terms of health and bacterial infections like E. coli, a mad cow disease, and how inhumane it is for the cows. Like, he will describe, so after the cows are shot, the company and the industry maintains that they have died and that they're unconscious after that. But the cows are then hoisted up by one of their legs up onto these hoisted up onto like a conveyor belt, held up by one of their legs by a hook. And the cows are still twitching reflexively, and the industry says that doesn't mean that they're conscious. And the quality assurance managers actually, and he describes this, they will write down. You're supposed to check their eyes to see if they can to see if they're blinking, and that's how you can supposedly tell if they're still alive or not. But the quality managers, and he describes this, won't even want to go to the floor to check it because it, quote, makes them sad. So they'll just lie and put down the numbers. And so presumably many of these cows are still alive and still conscious. And when all of this is happening and they're going further and further down the line and being hacked into. And I mean, I don't want to just list off these gory practices, but I think, you know, as a society, we have an obligation to know about it, and we have an obligation to understand what's happening and to sort of cast light into these diminished areas. I have several more sections that I would like to read from. It's clear that the author is an incredibly intelligent person, and he has wonderful analysis. Let me see. And there's a very human component to this as well. Like, a lot of the people working in the slaughterhouses are Mexican immigrants, and the author describes a lot of different, like, one man who is like, he works 50 hours a week at the on the factory floor, and he makes $400 a week. But he has been paying an American citizen $100 a week to use the Social Security card, and for him to hold this job. And so he only retains $300 for what he makes each week. And the American citizen has told him that he wants $150, and he uses the money for child support. But the Mexican man can't afford to pay him that, so he's going to have to leave and find another job and go back to Mexico with his family. And things like that are really, again, provide the sort of, illuminate sort of the status of the workers as well, because the workers are being mistreated, and it shows that whenever we have something distasteful in society that we need done because we're unwilling to make the mere to make the mere sacrifice of our conveniences, we just hoist that down to the next unfortunate people group. So we do that with garbage collection. We love to live in our modern houses and things like that, but we can't, you know, be surrounded by our own garbage. And the author talks about this in the epilogue. We hide away birth, and we hide away death, and we pretend it doesn't exist, and like we leave it cloistered away. And we also hide away, and particularly slaughterhouses. And it's just, and he talks about this, again, as a worker, and having all of this being hidden in plain sight and growing accustomed to the bloodshed, and dealing with that and these sort of emotional fallouts. And let me see. And sort of like not being forced to confront these sort of these actual atrocities in our everyday lives. That is a privilege that we have, of being able to buy prepackaged cheap meat. And let me see. I don't know, it's hard to talk about, and I've kind of, like, it's hard to talk about and it's hard to read about it, but we have an obligation to. And this is going to be less about the book and more about my rant, but one of my own personal pet peeves, so to speak, is that we use the word humane to talk about any act of sort of compassion or any act of non-cruelty, when in fact, and it's derived from the word human, referring of course to Homo sapiens like ourselves. And I think when in fact, if you look at what any other species has done to all other species, we are by far the most cruel. And what we have done is so barbaric that even though we use the word animal as a derogatory term, we should be so privileged to have, I mean, yeah, this is, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to condemn people, and I don't want to, and I want everyone to make their own personal decisions, but we have an obligation to look into this, and we have an obligation to see this. And this is, if anyone is a fan of Game of Thrones, there is, this isn't a spoiler at all, but one of the main characters, Eddard Stark, also known as Ned Stark, Lord Eddard Stark, he is Lord of the North in Winterfell, and he takes his son, when he is 7, to an execution, and he has to execute a deserter. And the Lords of the North have always executed their own prisoners. They've never hired an executioner to do it for them. And his son asks him why he does that. And he says, "You owe it to a man to look into his eyes and hear his last words, because a man who sets the sentence must swing the sword. And if you cannot look into his eyes and hear his last words, then perhaps he does not deserve to die." And I think that's really relevant here. If you can't stand to hear about the slaughter of animals, and if you can't stand to look into their eyes as they die, and if you can't stand to kill them with your own hands, then I would say you have no right to eat them, and you have no right to cause their death, and to pass on your own distaste of killing onto a less fortunate member of society. I think I'll end it there. So thank you all for watching. I shall see you all next time. Doi.